It was the fiercest storm that we've had in the Bay Area.
For a very small plane to try to cross the Sierra in the face of a storm, I found that surprising.
When the plane goes down like that, you do fear the worst.
We were not expecting to find anyone alive.
From the Weather Channel, this is Storm Stories with meteorologist Jim Cantori.
Living in the San Francisco Bay Area is as good as it gets when the weather is with you. But when the jet stream over the Pacific Ocean starts blasting storms in the winter months, big, bruising systems loaded with winds, rain, and snow, it can catch people by deadly surprise. Dramatic evidence comes just 3 days into the new year of 1982. A large, slow-moving storm system slams Pacific moisture into California. The Bay Area is pummeled with rain for 3 straight days. Deadly mudslides result.
The death toll so far is 23, but at least a dozen more people are missing, some of them buried
There
in
were trees coming down, houses falling off of cliffs. It was just a ferocious storm.
Further to the east, along the 400-mile-long mountain range known as the Sierra Nevada, the storm will unleash powerful winds and up to 8 feet of snow. But on the afternoon of Sunday, January 3rd, at the Mammoth Lakes Airport on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada, the skies are calm. It still seems like a good day for flying. Ron Vaughn, his wife Lee, and her 10-year-old son Donnie are flying their private plane back to the Bay Area after celebrating the holidays in Colorado and Oklahoma. Ron, a chemist, and Lee, a lawyer, share a passion for flying, although Ron is more experienced.
They flew everywhere for vacations. Flying was just a part of their life.
In a hurry to get home, Ron wants to pilot his single-engine Grumman Tiger plane directly over the Sierra Nevada mountains.
They both had to be at work on Monday, and so we were expecting them home in the, dinner hour or shortly thereafter.
But with an eye on a gathering storm to the west, Flight Services tells him that's not a good idea. So Ron files a flight plan that takes them north along the eastern edge of the Sierras, hoping to cross the mountains where the weather is supposed to be less severe, near Reno, Nevada. The plane takes off at 3:30 in the afternoon, just as the monster storm is moving in.
The Sierra Nevada can be pretty treacherous for a little airplane, so a plane that doesn't have the power to counteract a strong downdraft is going to get pushed down.
And that's just what happens to Ron Vaughn's little plane. 40 minutes after takeoff, he tells flight controllers he's being buffeted by violent up and down drafts as strong winds interact with the terrain. Soon after that, he reports he is losing altitude and he can see the ground. Seconds later, radar contact with the plane is lost. Its last known location, north of Tioga Lake in Yosemite National Park.
Fear was that they flew into the storm and had crashed.
When the plane goes down like that, you do fear the worst.
Because it's almost dark, any search efforts will have to wait for daylight. But when the storm rages on into the following day, the various search and rescue teams' hands are tied. It's too risky to go out in a blizzard.
Because it was storming, you couldn't fly in, and the area is extremely rugged.
Yosemite Winter Backcountry Rangers, Chaz and Ann McQuarrie, are stationed just a few miles from the last known point of the aircraft. They set out on foot Monday morning to look for the missing plane.
We were on skis, and we were sinking essentially to our waists. We switched to some really big snowshoes that we had, but it took us well over 2 hours to go about 1.5 miles.
That day, it snows a record total of 48 inches. And despite their efforts, the McQuarries see no signs of the plane.
It's awfully hard to look for a downed plane in the middle of a huge snowstorm when you can only see, 10 feet in front of you.
Tuesday, January 5th. The snow isn't letting up, forcing searchers to wait yet another day to get efforts underway. They are losing valuable time.
You're anxious to get the search and rescue started and look for Donnie and his mother and stepfather.
But the snowpack has hardened, so now the McQuarries can cover more ground on their skis. Still, they find nothing.
The plane went down during big storm, so it might well have been covered with snow.
On Wednesday, 3 days after the plane's disappearance, the skies finally clear, and the air search is launched using volunteer airplanes and a Navy search and rescue helicopter. But deciding where to look is complicated by confusion over the pilot's intended flight path. And there's not a moment to lose if they are going to find any survivors.
Vaughn's aircraft was last seen on radar in the mountains right here with a heading of roughly northwest, which was quite a ways off his intended route. He should have been over here. Instead, he's over here.
Searchers decide the pilot must have been lost.
Our strategy was to look for an airplane operated by a pilot who didn't want to be there and was looking for any way out. And so we searched a fairly wide area around the point last seen in all directions, checking canyons and places that might trap an aircraft.
That approach yields no results on Wednesday, so the search area is tripled in size on Thursday. By the end of the fourth day, the plane is still missing, and hopes of finding it and any survivors are fading fast.
The longer it goes, the more doubt creeps into your mind that maybe they aren't going to find it.
Each day it got more frustrating and you started to lose hope.
Many of the searchers are facing doubts too.
I was beginning to think that maybe it would be found in the spring, if then.
Hope is fading so rapidly that the Navy will only allow one more day of searching for the missing plane using their helicopter. But on Thursday evening, Yosemite Search and Rescue Ranger John Dill discovers critical new information about the plane's routing from local air traffic controllers.
While Vaughn was in the air, he had received permission to take his original preferred route, which was to follow Victor 244, that crosses the park right here and goes straight into the Bay Area.
It was the way Ron Vaughn wanted to go originally, the straightest and fastest way home. But it also meant that he had unwittingly flown directly into the jaws of a deadly storm.
He wasn't lost in there, wandering around in circles, looking for a way out. He wants to be there.
Unremarkable news perhaps for some, but for Dill, a pioneer in search and rescue techniques, it provides an essential clue.
I began to wonder, what else don't we know? And I decided, well, I might as well just see what his actual flight path is to see if I can get inside his head a little more.
Dill stays up all night carefully plotting the last few minutes of the airplane's radar points on a map. The track he creates convinces him the pilot is battling the storm's fierce winds and trying to steer himself back onto his chosen route, Vector 244.
Our plan that day was to hope that the aircraft was in the prime zone, that the pilot had decided to keep going west, that he didn't realize that there was this 12,000-foot wall ahead of him.
It's a risky move going back to search an area that had already been scanned 2 days earlier. But by significantly shrinking the size of the search zone, Dill hopes the odds are now in their favor.
It's putting all your eggs in one basket, doubling down your bets.
Coming on.
Friday morning, the Navy search and rescue helicopter crew, with Yosemite Rangers aboard, sets out to fly a newly concentrated search pattern along the eastern edge of the Sierra Nevada range. It's an area several miles long between Tioga Pass and just north of a 12,500-foot peak called Mount Conness.
It's all white, so basically you're looking for anything that's dark. So my eye was drawn to rock outcrop after rock outcrop because it could be a plane.
I remember taking a look at the situation and thinking, what would a pilot be thinking about in bad weather? How would you get your light airplane over this ridge of mountains that looks pretty formidable?
Just then, Navy pilot Dan Ellison spies a dip between two summits, a likely place for a plane battered down by rough winds to try to fly through.
And we hadn't flown 2 or 3 minutes when Jerry said, "Commander, I've got something out there at about 10 o'clock.
It was a very sharp shadow down the side of the mountain.
And we flew over it, fairly slow, 40, 50 knots, and fairly low, maybe 100 to 200 feet.
I said, there it is, you know, I see the plane.
You could see a vertical stabilizer sort of sticking up out of the snow on the side of this steep ridge. Looked like the plane had just gone nose in right into the mountain.
I guess I really first didn't believe that I'd found it. I was thrilled.
There was little time to celebrate. Reaching the plane was going to require everyone involved to put their own lives on the line. But they decide to take the risk, compelled by the hope that against all odds, someone might have survived.
I peered inside and I saw a little boy there.
January 1982, a massive storm system punishes Northern California. A light plane carrying 10-year-old Donnie Priest, his mother Lee, and his stepfather Ron has crashed somewhere in the Sierra Nevada mountains. After 5 days of searching, hope is wearing thin until a Navy search and rescue helicopter team spots the tip of the plane's tail sticking out of the snow along the eastern slope of a 12,000-foot peak.
I was not real optimistic that anybody could survive the impact of a mountain and then be buried for 5 days.
When we flew over the wreckage, there was no indication that anyone could have survived that crash. There were no footprints. The door hadn't been opened.
The search team still wants to check the plane for survivors, but the helicopter can't land nearby. The slope is too steep, and it looks like the snow on the mountainside might avalanche.
We decided that the best thing to do would be to offload a couple of the park rangers who had mountaineering experience, avalanche experience.
Backcountry Ranger Ann McQuarrie is on board, but they need another experienced mountaineer. So the helicopter goes back to pick up her husband, Chaz, and quickly returns to the scene. The helicopter drops them on a ridge above the plane, and they make their way from there.
I noticed after just a few feet that there was a avalanche fracture line. About an 18-inch slab had slid and then stopped. And so we thought, whoa, you know, this was obviously pretty hazardous conditions.
Ann McQuarrie stays above as her husband braves the climb over the avalanche fracture.
Fortunately, the slope didn't slide, and I think that may have been because the plane had sort of anchored it in.
Chaz McQuarrie starts shoveling out the plane.
As soon as the shovel hit the plane, there was this cry from inside.
He yelled up, "There's somebody alive in there." So then I forgot about the avalanche danger and ran down the slope towards him.
Chaz McQuarrie radios back the incredible message. There is at least one survivor.
We asked them to repeat the message, and they spelled it out for us, one survivor.
Together, the McQuarries dig out enough of the plane to uncover the rear passenger window.
I peered inside and I saw a little boy there.
I asked him, you know, how he was feeling. He said, you know, cold, obviously.
He was clearly hypothermic. We could see that his feet weren't in good shape, and he was really floppy, and I think he was still in shock.
Chaz McQuarrie reaches in and pulls out the boy.
He was basically shutting down as we were trying to get him out of there.
We wrapped him up as warm as we could. We just wanted to get him somewhere warm.
Up in the Navy helicopter, Crew Chief Jerry Balderson and pilot Dan Ellison know their work has changed dramatically.
Now we had a rescue mission in front of us, and we didn't have much time to do it, and we knew that this survivor had been in that aircraft for 5 days.
The practice drill is for the rescuer to be lowered on a hoist line and cut loose, but not on this day, especially not in this place.
My request to Dan was that I would like to stay on the hoist cable and hooked to the helicopter at all times. If something should happen and we have an avalanche, then the helicopter would just back off and fly away with me.
Their improvised plan puts the helicopter in a precarious position, holding a hover at high altitude, winds gusting to 30 knots, temperatures perhaps as low as -40 with the wind chill. The helicopter is dangerously low on fuel, and it's all happening on a mountainside at 11,000 feet.
There was no margin for error.
Balderson gets a sharp, unexpected physics lesson as he hits the snowpack. The spinning chopper blades are creating static electricity, electricity that's traveling down the hoist cable and discharging out his body.
It is quite a jolt. Your whole body shakes, you know, when it's not fun. But I really needed to get him into the harness as quick as I can.
This whole time we're in an absolute blizzard because the helicopter rotors are just blowing snow everywhere and it's freezing cold.
The three rescuers hustle, getting the young boy, 10-year-old Donnie Priest, into a rescue harness so he can be lifted into the helicopter.
I remember getting him into the rescue harness, looking down at him, and his eyes sort of rolled back and he just sort of went limp, and my heart just stopped. It was like, oh no, after that list word, stay with me.
The crew chief said, weight coming on. That was a really good feeling.
Once on board, Donnie regains consciousness.
When they hoisted Donnie and myself into the helicopter, he did ask me about his parents.
Back on the ground, the Macquaries know the news about Donnie's mother and stepfather isn't good.
They clearly looked dead. We touched the bodies and they were frozen solid.
While Donnie survived the crash into the mountain, his mother and stepdad died on impact.
To be there in the plane for 5 days with his parents dead in the front seat, I couldn't imagine it.
Now they were racing the clock to save Donnie. Would he make it?
Went at best airspeed back toward park headquarters.
The adrenaline's still flowing and my heart's still pounding away.
A monster winter storm thrashes Northern California, downing a small plane in the Sierra Nevada mountains. After a 5-day search, rescuers are amazed to find a survivor, 10-year-old Donnie Priest. Donnie's father and stepmother hear the unbelievably good news. The boy is alive.
We were really excited.
Great relief and joy that he was alive.
But Donnie's mother and stepfather, the pilot, didn't make it. And it looks touch and go now for Donnie. Choppered from the mountainside in critical condition, his core body temperature has dropped to a dangerously low 84 degrees. He is likely to slip into a coma, and then his heart could stop.
I think it was very close to not making it.
Doctors managed to stabilize Donnie, but the frostbite damage to his lower legs is irreversible. Both limbs need to be amputated.
The doctor was very frank with us and said, we're talking about saving Donnie's life.
Meanwhile, Donnie's rescue is front-page press. His story of survival, cheering news for a region battered by such a deadly storm.
The nurse who's cared for Donnie since he arrived says he's improving steadily.
Cameras are there throughout his recovery. And 4 months after the crash, the Oakland A's invite him to throw out the ceremonial first pitch on opening day. Donnie never lets his harrowing ordeal or his handicap hold him back. Not as a child, and not as a grown man.
Losing my legs only really created the fact that I couldn't run and I couldn't play soccer. I could do everything else I wanted to.
Now, 38 years old, Donnie doesn't remember much of the accident.
My first memory is, gee, how'd we get here? And then you call out your parents because you're a kid and they're supposed to fix everything for you. And you think, okay, well, they can't help you, they're dead, but you don't understand the concept of death at that age.
He does remember being trapped inside the plane's wreckage.
It was really, really cold with snow all around, so you're kind of like in a very small igloo. Being hungry, I looked for food, but I couldn't find any. You're thirsty, so right at first, you just start eating the snow.
Amazingly, as hours became days, Donnie says he never lost hope.
I never even considered the fact that I wouldn't be found. It's like, hey, this is the situation I'm in.
Today, Donnie still lives in the Bay Area. He owns a business building and fitting prosthetics for other amputees.
You know, you have to do something because you beat the odds.
In the summer of 2007, Donnie returns to the mountain that nearly claimed his life. He reunites with some of the heroes who saved him that day to search for answers to questions that still haunt him. But it's an arduous journey.
It was a lot steeper, it was a lot more treacherous, it was a lot bigger than you would have thought. Knowing how small that plane was, it really brought into focus the concept of luck.
And what he finds on the mountain is a fresh sense of awe and gratitude for what a team of determined, selfless professionals overcame to save him that day.
They knew what they were getting into, and they still did it anyways for somebody they didn't know.
The 1982 storm that downed the plane carrying 10-year-old Donnie Priest is one of Northern California's deadliest winter storms. 36 dead, over $300 million of damage. Amidst all that chaos, a team of search and rescue professionals saved Donnie's life. Dan Ellison and Jerry Balderson are awarded Navy medals for their heroism. Chaz and Ann McQuarrie, now living in Nevada, remember with pride their efforts that day. And John Dill, still a Yosemite search and rescue ranger, counts Donnie's rescue as his best work. As for Donnie, he keeps in touch with his heroes who plucked him from certain death.
You can't. It's a bond and it's a word you just can't explain.
If you ask what are the high points in our search and rescue careers, it's outcomes like this.
For the Weather Channel, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori. Your local forecast is next.